to my channel. I'm so glad you stopped by today because today we are going to be doing another dinosaur piece. A while ago I was making a lot of dinosaur projects. I needed a small break from them, but today I am back and I'm going to be making Blue from the Jurassic Park movies. Anyways, let's get started. Okay guys, so what we're going to do is we're going to start with the sewing of the body real quick, just like always. So I'm going to go over the pattern real quick, and you'll probably recognize it from my Galaxy Raptor video, and it's basically the exact same pattern. The only alterations that I made was to the arm. So since Blue doesn't have feathers and the pattern that I'm using was originally used for a raptor with feathers, I altered the arm piece just slightly so it was just kind of thinner, because the previous piece was a little bit bulkier so we could add feathers to it later. So we didn't need that, so I just kind of thinned it out a bit. Other than that, this pattern is exactly the same as when we did the Galaxy Raptor. So I'm going to use the pattern that we have, and I'm going to cut all my fabric pieces out. Now you'll notice that the fabric that we're starting off with is kind of a creamy khaki color, and obviously that's not the color Blue is, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be painting these. Now when I first started doing this, I kind of wanted to paint absolutely everything on. I wanted to go super detailed, and I realized it was actually looking horrible. Didn't like it, so I decided to go for more of a softer, more simplistic design for Blue. So I'm going to get my fabric all painted up, I'm going to let it dry completely, and then we're going to start on the sewing. Now you're probably wondering, where is Blue's stripe? Well, I originally was going to paint it on. Like I said, I wanted to paint all these amazing details on it, and it just wasn't working out. So instead, I'm going to be sewing it on. So what I'm going to use for Blue's stripe is this really pretty, dark, kind of shimmery fabric. So I'm going to take the back of our fabric, I'm going to draw out where I want the stripe to go, and then I'm going to pin this fabric into place on the other side of it, and we're going to sew around where we want the stripe to go. Then all we need to do is we need to cut off all the extra fabric. Now we're not completely done with Blue's stripe. It does have a white highlight that we're going to add later. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to start sewing all of our fabric pieces together. So I'm going to start with the legs and arms. I'm going to take the fabric pieces for the arms, sew them down the front, and then I'm also going to do the same thing with the back legs. Once the sewing is done for the arms and legs, I need to add the arms to the body. So I'm going to cut a little slit, and we're going to sew the arms right into place. Then I'm going to take the belly piece and I'm going to sew the body pieces to this. So I'm going to connect everything together. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start on the clay hands and feet first, and then we'll move on to making the face. So the hands and feet both need a wire frame, so I made a very simple one, and what we're going to do is we're going to build our clay off of this. So I'm going to start by adding a little bit of clay to support all the wires being connected, and then I'm also going to add clay to the ends of all the wires to make the claws. So we're just going to add a little bit of clay to the end of each wire and then just roughly shape it into the idea of what we want the claw to be. And then we can add a little bit more detail here and there once we're done. Once we have all of our claws done on the hands and feet, we're going to end up baking these for about 20 to 25 minutes at 275 Fahrenheit to save our work in progress. That way we don't have to worry about bumping our claws. Once that's out of the oven and it's cooled to touch, we can start adding more clay to our wire frame. So I'm going to start by making the bottoms of the hands and the bottoms of the feet. So we're just going to cover the bottoms of all of the wire and then just kind of blend everything together and slowly kind of add more and more shape to it. Now I'm going to try something a little bit different with Blue's hands and feet. Normally when I make my raptor pieces, I end up having the fingers and toes a little too thin, and I really want to bulk them up for Blue. So I'm basically just adding more clay to the wire frame, just kind of thickening everything up. And then before we bake our hands and feet a second time, I need to add a little bit more texture to the bottoms of the hands and feet. So that fabric that we used to make Blue's stripe has this really cool kind of scaly texture to it that kind of sticks up a bit, and I'm going to just take a little scrap fabric piece of that and I'm going to push it into the clay and just kind of rough up the surface of the clay, and actually looks really cool. It kind of looks like tiny little scales. And then after that, I'm going to put our hands and feet in the oven for another probably 20 to 30 minutes at 275 Fahrenheit. Now with the tops of the feet, I'm also going to try something a little bit different with the scaling. Normally I just take little balls of clay, kind of roll them out, and then just layer them going down the foot. Well, instead of this, I'm just going to completely cover the tops of the feet, and I'm just going to make really tiny little scale pieces by just putting line work into the clay. So I'm just going to get everything completely covered, make sure I like the shape of everything, and then I'm just going to use my tools to push into the clay to make the scales. I'm also wanting my scales to be a lot smaller, so I'm keeping my lines really close together. Okay, so our hands and feet are finally done. We're going to bake them for one final time, 45 minutes at 275 Fahrenheit. So the first thing that we need to do to make our face is we need a base to start with. So I made a tinfoil cone and I'm going to start covering this completely in clay. I'm going to make sure everything is nice and thick. I'm going to get it completely covered, and then we're going to start blending our clay together so it's nice and smooth. Once everything is smoothed out, I'm going to start defining the shape of the face a bit more and kind of marking out where I want to add the details. Now for Blue's eyes, we're going to end up using some glass eyes, but before we put them onto the face, I'm going to put some little balls of clay down right where I want the eyes to go. That way I have a little bit more lift to the eyes and they're not so sunken in. So I'm going to put the glass eyes right on top of these clay balls, and I'm just going to kind of smush them and make sure to adjust them until they're nice and even. Now one thing you want to make sure you do when you add glass eyes to a clay face is you want to make sure they're nice and even. So instead of just checking from one point of view, move the head around, just kind of look at it from as many point of views as you can to make sure you have them positioned correctly. Once you're happy with where the eyes are positioned, we can start adding clay around them, making the eyelids, and just kind of shaping the clay around the face and just adding more detail to it. So I'm just going to keep building up clay, pushing it in, just kind of altering the shape of the head until I like how it looks. One thing that I'm going to do with Blue's face is I want to add a lot of detail to it, but I also don't want to add too much to where it looks cluttered and messy. So I'm going to leave a lot of portions just textured, and I'm going to end up painting details on later. So I'm kind of going for more of a simplistic style with Blue. I'm not trying to overwhelm myself with all the details of the scales and stuff. Now the mouth is another thing that you want to check from different angles to make sure that you have both sides even. Especially with a raptor, you really can't see both sides of the mouth at the same time unless you're looking straight onto it. So you want to kind of just keep checking to make sure you're drawing out the shape of the mouth the same way. And of course, you're just kind of scribbling it on right now and just making sure you get the basic outline, and then you can kind of dig into the clay a bit more once you know where you want everything. So I'm going to get the outline for the mouth done along with the nostrils, and then we're just going to add a bunch of scales and textures to the face. Once I'm happy with how the face looks, I'm going to put it in the oven at 275 Fahrenheit for probably about 45 to 55 minutes. Once all of our clay pieces are out of the oven and have cooled to touch, we can start on the painting. Now the painting for this is going to be a little bit different because I want to try and get the same colors of gray that we got with the fabric, and I figured since the fabric was khaki when we started painting the gray on and not white, the best idea is to turn my clay khaki before I start adding the gray. So I'm going to be primering everything with a very similar color to what the fabric was before we started painting it. So I'm going to get all of our clay pieces primered with a nice creamy khaki, and then I'm going to let those dry. Once those are dried, we can start adding our grays to the clay. So with our gray paint, I'm going to start really light and gradually darken the gray as we go. So I'm basically doing the same thing to all the clay pieces, just gradually adding more grade to it and make sure that I kind of give it a natural fade. Now, of course, we can add some lighter grays over the darker grays to add some highlights to it and just kind of mess around with the shadowing and stuff. So I'm just going to get a tiny amount of light gray on my brush. I'm basically just using a dirty brush. It's barely any paint on this at all. And then I'm just going to kind of go over everything to kind of highlight all the textures on the face and feet. And then the last little details that we need to add to the hands and feet, I need to paint the skin that goes around the claw and the claw itself. So the skin around the claw is going to be a darker gray, and then the claws are going to be a black. And then, of course, the last detail that we need to add to Blue's face is her stripe, because it does continue down her face. So I'm going to add that into place, get the blue all the way I want it, and then I'm going to outline it with white paint. Okay, so all of our painting is done right now. I do need to resin everything, but before I do that, I need to clean off the paint from the eyes. So everything is dried right now, and I'm just going to scrape off the extra paint that got on the glass eyes. Then we can put a layer of resin over everything, let it cure overnight, and then we can put everything together. Okay, it's the following day and we can start putting Blue together. So I've made a very simple wire frame for this, and we're going to start putting everything that we made onto the wire frame. So we're going to start with the fabric body and just kind of slide it over the frame, and then we're going to start adding the clay feet. So I'm just going to kind of wrap those into place, glue the fabric for the hands and feet around the ankles and wrists, let that dry, close up the back of them, and then stuff them. After all of Blue's limbs are in place and finished, we can add her head. So I'm going to take her clay head and we're going to glue it onto the wire for the neck. Then we're going to take the fabric for the neck and we're going to glue it around the base of the head. We're going to let that dry for a little bit, and then we can start stuffing and closing up the back of her. And then once we have Blue all put together, we just need to do one final detail. We need to add a white highlight going around her stripe. So we're just going to take a little bit of white paint and we're going to paint all the way around her stripe. Okay guys, and that's how I made Blue from the Jurassic Park series. I had so much fun making her and I can't wait to make more dinosaurs. If there's any other species of dinosaurs that you want to see made, make sure to leave them down below and I'll see what I can do. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!